Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples integrated recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. Today, I am talking about why resentment feels justified and why one of my favorite Stoics, Epictetus, says that is a problem. Let's start with where people actually live when they're holding a grudge. Resentment almost never feels irrational when you're inside of it. It feels justified because somebody crossed a line, betrayed your trust, or something important got minimized or treated casually. In that context, anger doesn't feel excessive, it feels proportionate. For a while, it might even feel justified or stabilizing. That part matters because Epictetus is not arguing that part. Resentment usually starts as a signal. It marks that something mattered. It organizes a story of what happened, and then it gives your nervous system a target. That's why letting go can feel unsafe. It feels like you're letting the other person off the hook or pretending that it didn't matter. Epictetus does not deny this starting point, but this is where it becomes confrontational. He's not asking for people to suppress anger. He is not asking for emotional maturity. He's asking if the anger reflects an accurate understanding of how human beings actually act. And this is important context because in Discourses 1.18, he's not speaking to someone who is overwhelmed with pain. He was speaking to his students who believed that their anger was justified and even right. So that was his target. The student says, "Of course I'm angry. Look at what they did." But Epictetus's answer is essentially, "Your anger tells me that you don't understand what happened yet." And this wasn't a moral condemnation. It was his diagnosis. Because here is his starting claim. People act according to what appears right to them. Not what is right. What appears right through their internal lens. Action follows perception. Resentment usually rests on a different assumption, that the person who hurt you knew better and they chose to do it anyway. Sometimes that's true. Anyone who knows me with my law enforcement background knows that I am not an apologist for bad behavior. I have one person that I know in particular that comes to mind that seems to maybe almost trying to get under my skin, almost always makes a case for someone's bad behavior by saying, "Oh, well, it's a diagnosis," or "You'd do that too if you had whatever background that person has." And I believe every person is unquestionably responsible for how they show up. But in Epictetus's frame, he is saying, more often, the person believed that they could have been protecting themselves or asserting control, or maybe they were avoiding shame or securing something that they didn't know how to get cleanly. This does not excuse harm, but Epictetus says that this is where the real failure is, not in you, but in that person's judgment. And this is where people push back. Okay, so you're saying it's really not that bad? No, Epictetus is not erasing harm, he's relocating it. Instead of locating the injury inside of your experience, how could this happen to me? He instead locates the root failure inside the other person's ability to judge what leads to a good life. and that relocation changes everything. This is not a modern therapeutic move, it's a Stoic one. And Epictetus was not interested in soothing people's emotions. He was interested in where damage actually lands. This is where his argument sharpens, because people don't step out of the consequences of their character once the interaction ends. They carry their inner world with them. A person who lies does not become internally settled after lying. A person who manipulates does not relax once the manipulation works. And a person who betrays does not suddenly regain stability once the betrayal is complete. Resentment survives on an idea. They walked away fine and I didn't. And Epictetus says that that is not correct. Externally, maybe, but internally, almost never. This is where he turns the blade not toward the wrongdoer, but towards the angry observer. And he says, if you are still furious, then you're angry at the wrong location. You are directing rage towards someone who is already living inside the outcome of their choices. And once that lands, a different question shows up. What are you still trying to get? More understanding? Validation? Repair? Those things will probably never come from that person. And as long as your nervous system is oriented towards extracting them, then resentment will always stay alive. Stoicism isn't asking you to soften, it's asking you to stop pursuing a resolution that demands on the other person becoming someone that they are not capable of being. That's the setup. So, here is where he tightens the logic. He follows a certain sequence and corrects false assumptions that would keep anger alive. So, I'm going to bullet point these out. Step 1, how human interaction actually works. Epictetus says that human beings do not act against what they believe will help them. They act according to what appears beneficial, protective, or relieving in the moment. And that appearance can be distorted, but the behavior follows anyway. This is why he uses the word error instead of evil, because wrongdoing begins with misjudgment. Here's the student says, oh, okay, I got it. So they're just confused? Yes, that's what Epictetus would say. The confusion has consequences. Point 2. The misjudgment damages judgment itself. So Epictetus is not focused on the act, he's focused on the faculty behind of it. The Stoics talked about the capacity to judge, choose, and orient oneself correctly. And if someone is acting on a false belief about what leads to a good life, then they don't cause external harm, they weaken that faculty. The mind learns the wrong lesson. That lesson doesn't disappear when the situation ends. This is the internal cost of wrongdoing. Point 3. Damaged judgment destabilizes that person. Epictetus treats moral error as a functional disorder. A person who is wrong about doing good and evil is not merely immoral. They're disoriented. They're just wrong. Their inner life is unstable. Their decisions are reactive. Their relationships are strategic. If someone believes that cheating, stealing, or deceiving leads to a meaningful life, they're not just immoral, they're fundamentally mistaken. Point 4. The internal injury happens first. This part is critical. The wrongdoer is damaged before the victim reacts. The injury occurs the moment the false impression is accepted. This is why Epictetus says your anger is misplaced. You are reacting as if the harm begins with you. He says it begins with the bad guy. The liar, the cheater, the manipulator, they have injured themselves before anybody else. They have lost the most precious human ability, good judgment. He assumes continuity with point 5, that someone who is mistaken about the good continues to live from that mistake until something corrects it. This is why the idea that someone got away with it actually doesn't survive scrutiny. They internalized a consequence, meaning you don't have to forgive in a sentimental sense, but empathy becomes easier when you can see the self-inflicted nature of that person's suffering. Point 6, anger misreads where the harm actually lives. This is the heart of Discourses 1.18. Anger persists because the observer believes externals are where the damage matters most. People don't wake up just wanting to live badly. They don't know how to live well, and living in that ignorance is a punishment itself. Epictetus says that the greatest harm is loss of right judgment and everything else is secondary. Once you correct that accounting, resentment starts to wobble. This leads to step 7 or point 7. Anger becomes the category error then. This is where he drops a blindness analogy. He asks whether we should be angry at a blind person for not seeing. And his point is not mercy, it's precision. You restrain. You protect yourself. You correct yourself if possible. Don't hate somebody for lacking a faculty. Hatred assumes clarity was present and rejected, but he says that normally that assumption is false. Their actions may have hurt you, but their confusion will hurt them forever. I'm going to go back and reorient that he is not talking about wrongdoers. He's correcting the observer. From a Stoic standpoint, persistent anger is diagnostic. It signals that at least one belief about good, evil, or harm is still wrong. Outrage feels meaningful. It creates villains. It justifies fixation. And he wants none of that. Anger is not powerful in his framework. It's evidence of confusion. So what does forgiveness actually mean for the Stoics? By the time that he finishes this argument, forgiveness has already been removed from the emotional category. There's no instruction to feel calmer. There's no page 417 AA that says acceptance is the answer to everything. There is no demand to soften. What changes is understanding. Forgiveness in this frame is not generosity. It is what happens when resentment no longer has a job to do. Resentment survives only if the mind believes that there is something left to extract, like that apology or that acknowledgement from that person. But once the belief collapses, attention disengages. Distance stops feeling like a loss, and it starts feeling like an alignment. So he uses an example about a lamp that was stolen. He's not asking you to excuse what happened or asking you to reconcile, and he's not asking you to soften your boundaries or become emotionally generous. He is showing how resentment loses its footing once the situation is understood accurately. It starts with acknowledging harm, not dramatizing it, not minimizing it. Something real happened. A line was crossed, a cost was paid. Stoicism would never ask you to pretend otherwise, but Epictetus does not let the story stop here. Once the harm is clear, he moves attention away from the narrative of you being wronged and onto the mechanics of the other person's behavior. Not excuses, not intention, but focusing on their bad judgment. What did they believe would help them? What were they trying to secure, avoid, or control in that moment? This question relocates the injury. The harm stops living inside your identity and moves back where it belongs, inside of their distorted understanding of what a good life is. When that relocation happens, boundaries become simpler. You don't need hatred to justify distance. You don't need ongoing anger to prove that the harm mattered. The line is already drawn. The situation is already complete. At that point, resentment doesn't get released because you decide to be above it. It drops because it doesn't have a function anymore. There's nothing left to extract, correct, or force into balance. Staying angry would only mean that you are organizing your inner life around someone who no longer has a meaningful role for you. He ends by telling his students that someone once stole his iron lamp. He heard a noise, checked, and the lamp was gone. And then he says something that sounds almost like he doesn't even care unless you understand the frame. He reflects, the thief will probably steal something of greater value next time, not just a lamp. Then he replaces the lamp with the cheaper one. He doesn't chase the thief. He doesn't go out and rage. He doesn't turn the event into a story of injustice. He just treats the theft as a transaction that is finished. The lamp is gone, the exchange already happened, and here is the real work. A person only loses what they have. Epictetus is not saying that the loss doesn't matter. He's saying that ownership was misunderstood from the start because the lamp was always an external. It was always vulnerable, it was never guaranteed, and it behaved exactly like unsecured things should behave. Once that's clear, outrage becomes late. Chasing a thief isn't going to recover the lamp. Ruminating isn't going to change the outcome. Continuing to rehearse the event would mean choosing to stay psychologically involved in something that's already finished. So he doesn't do any of that. He keeps his own internal order. The thief keeps his character, and that's the exchange. This is where the lamp story connects back to resentment. Resentment is the psychological equivalent of chasing the thief after the lamp is already gone. The event has already happened, the damage has already landed, the other person is already absorbed in the deeper cost of their poor judgment. What remains is a choice about attention. Epictetus refuses to keep paying after that transaction is already complete. The refusal isn't virtue, it isn't forgiveness, it isn't emotional restraint, it's accuracy. So this is why he says very little about the lamp. There's nothing left to explain once the accounting is correct. The theft didn't injure his character, it revealed the other person's, the thief's. And further emotional entanglement would mean misplacing his inner life onto an event that has already concluded. Resentment feels justified because it starts with a real violation, but it persists only when the mind continues to believe that there is still something left to recover, like fairness, recognition, balance, or understanding. The lamp story says otherwise. There's nothing left to extract. What's done is done. The wrongdoer has already taken their share, and it isn't the one that they think it is. They walk away with the object, yeah, absolutely, and reinforced distortion about what a good life is. You are left with a decision about whether or not you're going to keep your internal order or if you're going to turn it over after the fact. He replaces the lamp and moves on, not because he is forgiving, but because nothing else makes sense once the situation is seen clearly. That's the Stoic endpoint. Not peace as the goal, not forgiveness as the achievement, but disengagement as a consequence of accuracy. When resentment finally drops in this frame, it isn't because you tried letting go, it's because there's nothing left to hold on to. I'll leave you with a practice that you can try. Bring to mind somebody that hurt you. Someone that still lives inside your head rent-free when you think about them, and then ask, what confusion were they acting from? How has their life been shaped by their bad judgment? Is it possible that they have punished themselves more than you ever could? Do you actually need to stay angry? You might find, as Epictetus did, that the answer is no. In this circumstance, the work is correcting judgment. It's noticing if you are still assigning value to something that no longer belongs to you. It's recognizing when your anger is being fueled by a false belief about where the harm actually lives, and then withdrawing the attention once the accounting is accurate. When that happens, resentment doesn't need to be managed, it ends. That is doing the work. Not emotional effort, but intellectual honesty followed by disengagement. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.